Hello, friends. It's the Leaders World brought to you by Leaders World Institute, and today is super duper special. Why is it so? Because we're going to be talking on the topic women leading on with our voices and our stories. You want to share this. I know that's what you want to do. Go ahead and do it right now because you don't want to miss this and you don't want nobody to miss this. All right. Go ahead and share it to your friends and colleagues and family members. Today is special because we have two powerhouses in the studio. And I'm going to let you know who they are. We have Professor Estela Atekwana, who is an award winning distinguished professor and multidisciplinary scientist with 30 years experience in higher education, leadership, teaching, research, and consulting. Internationally recognized expert in geophysics, published 150 papers, 250 conference papers, and more than 100 presentations at universities and research institutions globally. She has served as project director on multidisciplinary, multi-institution, multinational projects, up to about $11 million in US and sub-Saharan Africa. She's organized international scientific meetings and keynote speaking at conferences globally. She serves on multiple advisory boards nationally and internationally. She is a primary advisor and mentor for more than 100 PhD, MS, BS students and champion for developing a diverse talent pool in STEM and capacity building in developing countries. Ladies and gentlemen, with us in the studio is the amazing Professor Estela. You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
So this is Professor Estela Atekona in the studio, and today we are talking women leading on with our voices and our stories. All right. And we have another lady in the studio with us. She is no stranger to us as well, and she's been with us before. She is Lady Justice Vera Nkwate Ngasa. All right. For the past 36 years, Lady Justice has served in the Cameroon judiciary as a prosecutor and judge. She is currently a justice in the Supreme Court, and she is also an adjunct lecturer and developed the curriculum for women, human rights, and law, which she teaches at the Department of Women and Gender Studies at the University of Boya in Cameroon. And she is a human rights trainer and leadership coach and international faculty with Haggai Institute for Leadership, Hawaii, USA. Lady Justice Ngasa has contributed to many groundbreaking decisions and precedents in the areas of women's access to justice, property rights, and violence against women, especially sexual and gender based violence and trafficking in persons. Part of her work is featured in the BBC International Award winning documentary Sisters in Law. She writes and speaks extensively on protecting women's rights. Listen, I could go on, but I know you want to see her. I know that. You want to meet Lady Justice Ngasa. She is married to barrister Michael Ngasa, a lawyer and a minister of the gospel, and together they have 5 children. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me welcome in the studio, Lady Justice Vera Ngasa. You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Minister Susan, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh my goodness, my excitement is at 250, and I really need to struggle to calm down and really run this program in a responsible way. Um, Leading on with our voices and our stories. When you heard this topic, when I approached you and asked you to would you want to grace our audiences and speak on this topic? Lady Justice, what came into your mind?
Well, what came into my mind is I will first of all speak the truth. Professor Atekwana happens to be my older sister, and she is the kind of older sister that makes me do things. So she said, I should be on the program. But on a more serious note, when I heard stories and voices, of course, that, just brought up a lot of passion in me because that's the way I see myself. I'm a voice for the voiceless. From a very early age, I have been a spokesperson for
Mhm.
whatever group I am in,
That's correct.
and I had that kind of what will I say, destiny. Papa, we have something to say, and Vera will say it for us.
And may and
Voice.
may I add that growing up as kids, even though I was the oldest, every time we would get into a fight with the neighborhood kids, she would be the one to be my protector, fighting on my behalf. Can you believe that? And she was the younger one. So I always knew that she was destined to be in the judiciary because she always has been an advocate for people who could not speak up for themselves.
Voice for the voiceless. That's Lady Justice Ngasa with us in the studio, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Atekwana, when you heard this topic, leading on with our voices and our stories, what's the first thing that came into your mind?
Well, I number one, when you first approached me, I was thinking, I'm so busy. I was actually out of town. And I said, do I really have the time to do this? But then I realized that as my position as dean, I could use this platform to be able to uh, inspire other people. And so I thought, if I didn't do this, then who would? And these are multiple areas by which we can get our voices heard as women. And I think that in my position, it is incumbent upon me to be able to do that. And so I said
Oh, wow.
yes.
Thank you so much. We are truly, truly grateful. If I do not do this, then who would? If I
Yes.
do not do this, then who would? That sense of purpose, that sense of urgency, that sense of responsibility. But why is it important for women to tell their own stories, Lady Justice?
Well, basically because women are people. Stories are told not by animals or by inanimate objects. Stories are told by human beings. And women constitute at least 52%
Mhm.
of these people. Now, the question is, what is a story? A
Hmm.
story is a narrative, either fictional or real, that is told so that the audience can learn.
Hmm.
There are always lesson learned, even if it is a parable or even if it is fiction. There is a morale behind every story, and there
Mhm.
is a lesson to be learned. There is something to be communicated to the audience. So the question is, do women have stories? They should tell their stories because they do have stories.
Yes.
Women are people with real life experiences who live in real life and who seek to impact real people. So imagine um, a story where 52% of the people who participated in it are left out. That story will be incomplete.
Right.
So it is when we leave out 52% of the world's population, then the story of the world is incomplete. History is incomplete and, in fact, inaccurate.
Wow. Wow. It's not only incomplete, it is inaccurate. Professor, why is it important for women to tell their
Mhm.
stories, their own
So
stories?
yes, so adding to what my sister just said, what the justice just said, very important because she says that those stories are our lives. And imagine somebody writing your story for you. Do they really know what you've experienced? Do they really know who you are? And remember that if we don't fill in the gaps, others will do it for us. And when they do so, they're going to do so uh, based on their own narrative or their perspectives of who you are, and often laced with bias or prejudice. And that's not what they think women are, right? And so if 52% are women and then the other 48% that are men are telling the story, they'll tell it from a man's perspective, and we know how that story ends. Not always the most accurate of stories. And so I really believe that it is really important for women to tell their stories.
What does it
Our,
actually mean for a woman to tell her own story, Professor? What does that even mean?
yeah, and let me just add that because our stories are they're very powerful, and the stories have been able to turn the tide of time, of
Hmm.
history, bringing much needed change in the workplace, especially as more and more women, right, have come into the workplace. And I also believe that
Right.
sharing those stories can truly be an inspiration to others. And depending on what that story is, right, it can allow other women to see possibilities. They say if you can see it or hear it, then you can be it. So that's why I think it's really important for women to be able to tell their stories.
So it allows other women to see possibilities. What does it
Yes.
actually mean for women to tell their stories, Professor? What does it mean to tell I am a regular woman. Let's say I'm a regular woman living my life, minding my business. What does it mean for me to tell my story in my home as a housewife taking care of my children? What does it mean for me to tell my story as a woman that has a job or a business? What does it really mean for me to tell my story as a woman in leadership position somewhere, somehow? What does it really mean to tell our stories?
So for me, for example, I've often had I I believe that telling my story is really the way I live my life on a daily basis. And without knowing it, every time you're in a leadership position or you're in the limelight, people look up to you whether you want it or not, whether you like it or not. And the values that you expound, people look at that. I've often had women come up to me and say, "Oh my God, you so inspire me. You're my role model." Many times I don't even know them and have not really interacted with them, but that's what they tell me. you know so that's why I really believe that it is important to share those lived experiences when given that opportunity. And that's why I said yes to this program, because there may be somebody out there. This woman may be a housewife, but we don't know why did she decide to be a housewife. It could have been a choice, or it could have
Mhm,
been no choice of her own.
mhm.
But by seeing somebody like me, and she has a little daughter, she could say, I want you to grow up and be like that. Or that little daughter could say, oh my goodness, I couldn't be this, but look at that person. I want them to grow up to be like you.
Wow, 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 wow. I really like the way you explained how women can make their voices heard and the impact of those voices being heard. If I should come to Lady Justice about some of those lived experiences that have been your story that could inspire other women, would you want to share some of those with us, some of those lived experiences which are part of your story and which could inspire other women, because we are leading on with our voices and our stories, and we're trying to bring out the importance of storytelling and why we should tell our own stories.
As you can see, we are in Cameroon. The lights just went off, so I'm struggling to adjust the
We can still
lights.
see you and we
Uh,
can hear you, so we are good.
okay, yeah. So, where do I start? Story of my life. But I would like to, to emphasize the word experience,
Mm.
because your story is what you've been through. It's not only who you are and why you were born, but what you've been through. Now, before, leadership is not only earned, that is to say, people have got to trust you. You've got to be credible. You've got to be able to deliver the goods. And then they will listen to you. They won't just listen to you or want to follow you because you are a beautiful face or because you happen to be a woman, but you have to be a person of purpose. And I will start by saying that for every woman, you must answer some questions and then you really start living, and then you have a story to share. First, you must define, why was I born at all? Why was I not still born? Why am I here? Is it just to take up space? No, I must have a purpose. So your purpose is the reason for your being. And you have to discern that yourself. You don't have to let the male paradigm tell you why you were born. And then you have to ask yourself, who am I really? Because people are going through an identity crisis. They don't know who they are. You have to know who you are. Learn to define yourself. Know yourself and define yourself. And then you have to ask yourself, why do I see what I see? What am I here to do? What problems am I here to solve? That's your vision. And how am I going to go about it? That's your mission. So I said leadership is discerned. You not just, yes, sometimes you become a leader, or you realize you're a leader by serendipity. But
Mhm.
after that, leadership is intentional. So you
Yes.
have to work on it. Now, you have to have a vision for what is not right. You see, people don't see the same. People have different perspectives. You remember the story of the six blind men who went to see an elephant? Now that's what do they call that in English? An oxymoron or something, because it's contradictory in terms to say that blind men went to see an elephant. But each one caught a little perspective of what they thought an elephant was. This one says it's a blanket because they got the ear. The other one says it's a tree trunk. That's why I don't like going about with foolish people like you. How can you see a tree trunk and you say it's a blanket? And then the other one got the tail and said it's a rope. So what you see is usually in your sphere of influence, and
Mhm.
you can change it. Believe me or not, the way you see things is not the way that others see things. And so when you begin to see a problem and it begins to worry you, you want to challenge the status quo, then you probably might be able to solve that problem. Or in fact, you are seeing it because you were meant to solve it. So basically, um, entering the legal, I've been in the judiciary 35 years, 36 actually. I was a prosecutor, I was a judge, and I will recount like 2 or 3 stories that in which I changed things. I challenged the status quo. Um, One of the stories was a prostitute. Now you can imagine in the early 80s, or no, late 80s, a prostitute was a low down, good for nothing person and had no voice. So this lady, her name was Margaret Nienti. I can't forget her. It was in 1988. No, 89. I was on the bench. I just got to the lower bench. And this guy, the accused person, well, takes her in, for their business, and then turns around, abuses, beats, manhandles this woman, and then uh, even takes away the 1,000 francs, 1,000, $2 that he was supposed to pay her. And this is what she does for a living. This is how she eats. So she made a complaint. And everybody was like, whoa, 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 prostitute. How dare you say you were raped? How dare you this? Who asked you to even come to court? Who just shut up? And are you not ashamed? And I listened to her story and I said, a prostitute can be raped.
Okay.
And so I found the man guilty of assault and ordered her to pay her money. So that caused a kind of uproar. But this is a woman who, if she had not had the opportunity to probably meet me, would have gone away with, a lot of injustice, and it would have kind of defined. She would have felt like a dog that the society intended her to be. But I gave a voice to a prostitute.
Oh, wow. Wow.
By the way, prostitution is a
Powerful.
crime both ways. So he was not going to blackmail her by saying, you are a prostitute. You too, who caught a prostitute, you are a prostitute. You were aiding and abetting prostitution. So, and I said nobody had pressed charges against her for the prostitution. I was looking at the rape and the assault and not what she was doing in the course of it.
Wow.
And that has been my paradigm when it comes to trafficking in persons. 90% of the victims of trafficking in persons in Africa are always sold into forced marriage and forced prostitution. So already they find themselves with no defense, no voice. They should not talk because, for instance, that before somebody gets into trafficking in persons, there's very little kidnapping. What happens is, they don't kidnap them. What happens is the victims or their families willingly go into it. They change their identity. They forge their name. They forge a passport in order to go for greener pastures. So already they will blackmail them and say you were committing a crime, so don't talk. But that's not my view of it. And then there was the case of the famous cases that are in sisters-in-law. Cameroon up till today does not have an offense against wife battery. It's not an offense. In fact, in 1975, the Supreme Court of Cameroon ruled that a man has the traditional right to correct his wife. That is, he can beat her up a little to correct her and to discipline her. And so it's still not a crime. There was an amendment of the Penal Code in 2016, but somehow or the other, they removed wife battery from it.
Oh,
But
wow.
in 2005, 2004, 2005, I was a prosecutor. I found myself strangely a prosecutor because honestly, that's not my career profile. I don't see myself as a bloodhound because to be a prosecutor, you have to have this bloodhound instinct where if you get somebody, you don't let them go. I saw myself more like a laid back person who sits on the bench and listens. And in fact, 29 years of my career has been on the bench. But that gave me an opportunity to say, no more beating of your wife. After all, the law does not write anywhere that it is a defense if the person you beat up is your wife. So I took the ordinary law that says, thou shalt not beat another, and I used it on husbands. And they tried to mock me at first, but that gave women a voice.
Wow.
Indeed.
Wow. Listen, if you're watching or you are watching the replay and you come to this point, I want you to just write in the chat for us. Okay, write in the chat. Let's know you're there. Women, our voices, our stories. Write in the chat for us. Women, our voices and our stories. Today is special. We are talking women leading on with our voices and our stories. And with us in the studio, we have two powerhouses, Lady Justice Vera Ngasa and Professor Estella Etekona. Like I said, you get a chance to win one of my books today. If you hang in there, I'll let you know how you're going to win this. But yeah, I'll tell you soon, but not right now. Just hang in there. And Lady Justice just told us that women should be able to ask themselves questions. Why was I born? Ask yourself these questions and then look for the answers. Why was I born? Who am I really? because when you know yourself, you'll be and you define who you are, then you can understand your mission and your vision, and you will not let nobody else define you. And that is the beginning of letting your voice be heard. We're talking about lived experiences of women and how those translate into our stories and our voices. Professor, did you want to share some of those lived experiences with our audiences that could inspire a woman out there and let us know the importance of letting our voices be heard and letting our unique stories be told?
Wow, that was powerful, isn't it? So you can see
Yes.
why she advocated for me, even though I was a big sister growing up, always for me. Um, so my path, of course, was different in terms of what we decided to pursue in our careers. Today, I am I am the dean of the College of Letters and Science at the University of California, Davis. And just to give you a perspective, my college is the largest college in the university. We have about 16,000 students, 900 faculty, 350 staff, 37 departments and programs. That's who, I administer. So as the liberal arts college, we are really the heart and soul of the university. No student, no undergraduate student goes through a university without going through a liberal arts college, right? That's where you take
Wow.
all the general education courses. So a lot of work for us to do. And so the question then is that how did I, as a young girl from Cameroon, end up at UC Davis? And did I always know that I wanted to be a dean? Of course not. I'm not sure that there's anyone who really grows up saying that I want to be a dean. People don't even know what a dean is. I remember last year during our open house of freshmen for high school seniors who just been admitted into UC Davis, and we have an open house. So we have college open houses, and this young high school student was being introduced to me, and they said, "This is the dean, the College of Letters and Science." Has this perplexed look on his face. What is a dean? What does a dean do? And I said, and I proceeded to explain what a dean does. And then halfway through the explanation, I said, his face light up. Oh, you mean you are the principal? And I said, yes, I am the principal. I am the principal.
Yeah. Let's
you know,
just
so I said, yes, I am the principal. So um, I went to university like, many of us did with the aspiration of wanting to pursue a career in medicine because that was
oh,
really the only career choice that was an option that was available to me. But I said somewhere I missed my road on the way to medical school and I became an earth doctor, aka a geophysicist, right? And geophysicists image
mhm.
the earth and try to understand what's wrong with the earth so we can try to solve the problem. So that's why you ask me sometimes I'm an earth doctor. And when you have a PhD, what do? You end up teaching and doing research. So that's
Right.
what by serendipity, as the Lady Justice said, sometimes you get into leadership either by choice or just by serendipity. And in this case, I became a professor by serendipity. And so after many years of being in the classroom and in the lab or out in the field doing work, I came to a point in my life where I saw too many things were not going right. And through my own lived experiences, what I had experienced as a student, having lack of support, lack of mentors, lack of resources, and I decided then that I needed to become an administrator. Just
Okay.
so that you know, when you are a professor and you become an administrator, your colleagues tell you you've gone on the dark side of academia. As a matter
Oh,
of fact, when I became a department chair, people wrote me letters of condolences. We're so sorry you've become the department chair. And that's the attitude that most people take towards the step up
Why? But why?
It is because people always think that administrators don't understand what faculty do. They are not there for the students and the faculty. They're there for themselves and to
Oh,
empower them. Yes. But
okay.
for me, I saw it as a position of advocacy and giving voice to those same faculty whose voices could not be heard.
Right.
That was that was my motivation for getting into leadership, is so
Mm,
that I can use that pulpit to bring the much needed change to support women, minorities, and marginalized people in the um, academic ecosystem.
hmm.
And so that is how I have seen myself playing that role. And I just give you a little example. Um, I was at one university, admission requirements. It made no sense how they were admitting graduate students. And I saw that the students that were being admitted were predominantly only white, despite the fact that a lot of Black students were applying and international students were applying. But at the end of the day, funding was being given only to uh, the majority white students, and the Black students or the international students were, if they were even admitted, were not given support. And I said, this is not right. This doesn't make any sense.
Hmm.
So I decided to become the graduate coordinator, because then I can have the power to make that change. And
Right.
I developed a rubric that was based on the the credentials of the students and what we wanted in our students. See what that happens?
Hmm.
Not what we thought, but what kind of a model student did we want? So I wrote a rubric to so that when reviewing applications, we would use that. And
Right.
people would tell you, if you want to bring change into the diversity of the people that you hire and recruit, you
Hmm.
have to use a rubric based on what role you want that person to perform.
Wow.
And with doing that, we opened the doors. All of a sudden, at the end of the admission cycle, the students that had been admitted looked so different. So small things like that, you know,
Yes.
developing mentoring programs, because as women, there are not too many people that look like us in leadership positions. So important for us to have role models that can help support us, inspire us, mentor us. And so I've developed mentoring programs. That has been my
Wow.
number one priority, is developing mentoring programs for our students, mentoring programs for our female faculty, mentoring programs for our female students. And because I know that mentoring is so important, you need somebody to help you. You need somebody to support you. You need somebody to just listen to you,
Yes.
hear you out, give you advice. That's basically what it is. And so
Right.
that's what I've dedicated my life really to do, is to be able to really support, move people up that academic ladder or move people up that social ladder.
Mm, wow. Leading on with our voices and our stories, that is Professor Estella Atekona, that has been speaking with us. And at the beginning, she said when she received this invitation, she is a very busy person. And she was like, oh, I don't think I have the time. But then she asked herself, if I do not do this, then who would? And that's why she's here with us today, and letting us know the importance of our voices and our stories. When we come back, and we are going to be talking about silence and powerlessness and how they go hand in hand, and why you, yes, you, should let your voice be heard. We'll see you soon.
For your corporate and personal needs.
Leaders World Institute, changing lives, one leader at a time.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Leaders World, brought to you by Leaders World Institute, and I am in the studio with Lady Justice Ngasa and Professor Tekona, and we are talking on the topic women leading on with our voices and our stories. Why must we let our voices be heard, and why must we tell our stories as women? Lady Justice, why must we actually say something? Why must we actually do something? There is a saying that silence and powerlessness go hand in hand. Your thoughts on that, ma'am?
Yeah, that's a very beautiful way to put it. Silence and powerlessness go hand in hand. What is silence? They say, shut up, keep quiet. Women should be seen, not heard. You know, when people stereotype you or, begin to oppress you, or if people put you in a box, every box has a lead. So eventually they will just shut the lid of that box and women will not even be seen, let alone being heard. When you cannot express yourself, then you are power,
Yep.
because every gift, every talent, every experience has to be expressed. That's why we're talking about voices or stories being told.
Mhm.
And so, if you cannot talk, there are different ways of talking. Voting is talking.
Mhm.
By just picking a ballot paper and putting it in a slot, in a box, you are making your voice heard because you are saying that this is a candidate I am voting for. If a woman cannot go into parliament or into the Senate and, you know, talk to issues that will help develop women or issues that will help alleviate poverty, then that is silence and that is powerlessness. So,
Hmm.
silence and impotence are two sides of the same coin. If a woman cannot go to where they are sharing land and say, let this portion be reserved for women and girls, then she has been, gagged. In law, we say you have put a gag order on the person. So she has been gagged, and so she's powerless. She cannot express herself. She cannot, live a normal life in the area of land tenure. That's
Mhm.
powerlessness. If a woman cannot speak in the education system, if our voices cannot be heard, then we are absent from the educational system. Therefore, it is zero for women in the educational system. If women cannot be heard in the business world, in banking, or as CEOs of companies. In justice, we say we get in but not up. Let me explain a bit what that means. In the justice system, women do get in the lower rungs. They get in as lawyers, as deputies to the state prosecutors, as perhaps judges of the lower bench. But by the time you're getting to courts of appeal and to the Supreme Court, where the law is actually made, because especially in a legal system where there is precedent, the judgments of the lower courts do not count much when it comes to saying what the law is. It is
Hmm.
when those judgments have come to the Court of Appeal and to the Supreme Court, and these courts have ruled on it, then that states the position of what it should be. Let me give you an example. There's the infamous 1986 case of Achu and Achu, where a male judge said, woman is property and property cannot own property. That was because it was in the Court of Appeal. Okay, if there are no.
Oops.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is Lady Justice Ngasa. She has She's joining us from Cameroon, and we are really, really happy that she was able to be here. She sent us a message saying it's raining cats and dogs, and we don't have electricity, and she was still able to join us, and we are so happy that she is here with us. Yes, ma'am. You were telling us about this infamous case of Achu and Achu. And
yes.
Yes, I'm just giving you an example of the voices of women and the voices of men.
Yes.
When men are allowed to tell the story, is what Chimamanda calls the danger of a single story.
Yes, ma'am.
People from another paradigm are telling your story for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was saying that in the judiciary, we have this syndrome which is called in but not up. Now, the courts of appeal and the Supreme Courts are where laws are made. That is, when the Supreme Court says something about an issue, that is the law. So you have a case of Achu and Achu, where a male judge says woman is property and property cannot own property. What he was saying is that we women, we cannot have landed property. That is, we can have pots and pans and a few wrappers and perhaps a fan and a bed, but maybe even a car. But if it comes to land, houses, and cash crops, that's landed property, women cannot own property because bride price was paid. And indeed, that was not the law. This was just a biased and prejudiced judge talking. But at that level, there were no women in the Court of Appeal to decide. In fact, there were no women in the high courts. So you see, they got in at the lower ranks. There were prosecutors and magistrate court judges, but not in the high courts. Now, when women had an opportunity to get to the courts of appeal and to the high courts, of course, we turned the tables. Now our voices were heard. Justice Array, one of my, you know, the women I admire so much, my role models, Florence Rita Array, she's a pace setter in the judiciary. Once she had an opportunity, in a case where a woman was a customary law wife, Veronica Forjé against Nansikete, she said, a customary law wife has the right. That is, a customary law wife is a wife that was married according to native laws and customs. She does not even have the statutory marriage certificate, which makes her a legal wife that the law will recognize. But she says, no, she's been a wife and she has the right to stay in the matrimonial home and collect rents from two houses because she and her husband had worked together for 30 years. And the guy went on retirement and decided to retire his wife too. So he goes to divorce her, and Justice Array says she will stay in the matrimonial home and also collect rents from two of the houses. So you see, this is a voice of a woman at an upper level. So when women enter the judiciary at a lower level where they cannot make policy, they won't hear our voices. So we get in, but we need to get up to the courts of appeal, to the Supreme Court, so that we can make law. And, you know, I cited in another interview, I cited the case of David Chakokam against Kewu Magdalene. This was a case of the leviracy. You know the tradition in Cameroon where when a man dies, his widow must marry only his relative in order to stay in the compound because she herself is property. And because bride price was paid on her by the husband's family. And I would like women to understand the dangers of some of the things we allow. Because if a man's family pays bride price on you, it is not the husband you married who is actually a husband, but his whole family. And so when he dies, the bride price has not died. So they choose one of the deceased husband's relative to marry the widow in order for her to stay in the property. So that was what David Chakokam was trying to do in the case of Chakokam against Kewu Magdalene. And I said, no way. To say that a woman is property to be inherited and to force a so-called levirate wife to go back to her marriage is one of the most objectionable, unconscionable, and obnoxious prayers to have been brought before a common law court barely 2 years to the third millennium, because that was in 1998. So we
Wow.
need to get to the positions where our voices can be heard. We need
Wow.
to get into parliament. We need to
Wow.
get into Senate. We need to get into policy making positions, because if we are not there and we cannot speak, then we are totally powerless and absent.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
Wow, wow,
Ladies
wow,
and gentlemen,
indeed.
yes, that was Lady Justice Ngasa speaking to us all the way from Cameroon. And we are talking on women leading on with our voices and our stories. If you're watching us or you do the replay and you come to this part, I'd like you to put in the chat, women, tell your story. Women, tell your story. And Lady Justice mentioned about stereotypes, and she has been, bringing us a lot of education from the ecosystem where she works, which is the justice system. Professor, would you like to look at some of those stereotypes that maybe you see in other areas of life? And do they really still exist? Do they really still exist? Do they really still exist? Stereotypes against women. And what are some of them? And how can we just handle them?
Well, stereotypes are alive and well, despite our best interest. And at the university, we do a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion training to try to highlight our own biases that we all have, so that we can
Okay.
minimize, the stereotypes. Uh,
Right.
being a woman in STEM, and that's one area where there's a lot of stereotypes. Women can
Professor, what is STEM though, for those who
science,
might not know?
technology, engineering, and mathematics. So basically, the science type area, science and engineering. And so when we look at um, the proportion of women doing science compared to those that are doing the humanities and the arts, we see that there are more females in the arts and the humanities than in the sciences area, because we've been told growing up women cannot do science, you cannot do math, you cannot do physics, and we believe the stereotypes. Even for me, I, by serendipity or by fate or whatever it is, I stumbled onto geology in high school, and I remember that first day of class, the teacher saying, "Too many girls in this class. What are you doing here? Girls don't
What?
really do well in
Where
geology."
was that?
In Kasbambili.
That was in Cameroon.
That was in Cameroon, and I was shocked to hear somebody say that, but that actually motivated me, because for me, I've never wanted people to define me and who I am. I want to fight for myself. Our mother taught us that. She was a fiercely independent, believed so much in the girl child that she instilled that self-esteem in me, and I fought back. And I maybe that's why I had this love, for the earth sciences because of that. So there's so many stereotypes that continue even in leadership. As a leader, when a man comes into a room, they think they're a strong leader if they can exude this strength, lack of sympathy, and they want people to bow down before them, or they can yell at people. When they're assertive, they're like, that's such a strong leader. But when a woman comes in exhibiting assertiveness, confidence, they're like, you know what I mean? They use all kinds
Who
of
does she think she is?
all kinds of expletive, And so we've been put in these boxes where as a woman leader, oh, you're supposed to be nurturing, oh, you're supposed to be collaborative, oh, you're supposed to be nice to everybody. Oh, you cannot express yourself in terms of your anger, because when you do that, you're a terrible person. So those stereotypes continue to exist, even till today. And we have a long way to go to change that perception of who we are as women, especially when we lead. There's nothing wrong with being assertive. You need to be assertive, because if you're not assertive, people will just run over you. And the other thing that I find is we've talked about hearing women using their voices, and some of the experience that we get is the fact that you'd be in a meeting, a question will be asked, we're making some, or we're having a really, really discussion, and you give your contribution, and people just gloss over it as a woman, especially as a woman of color, especially as a Black woman. Let me use that as a Black woman. Didn't hear you. And then the next person says something, same thing that you said, and everybody like applauds them. Oh, what a wonderful, brilliant idea. You just said this. It happens all the time. It happens a lot when you're sitting in that C-suite with all the lots of men. That's really what happens. And sometimes even we as women do it. And I remember being in this executive meeting once, and the president asked a question, um, and I gave my idea of what I thought was happening. Nobody said anything. And then the next person, who was a guy, you know, uh, provided their own, contributions. And then at the end of the day, when they were summarizing, and the person who was leading this meeting was a female executive, started by saying, based on our contributions, the first person who spoke was the guy. I was the first person to speak, and I just raised my hand and said, excuse me, I was the first person to speak, and this is what I said.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow, wow, wow.
Yes. And the person and this female executive had to apologize. And when we talk about silencing, sitting silent, I think that especially when you've been given that mantle of leadership, it is incumbent upon us to speak out when we see injustices being made. And that is what the Lady Justice has been doing through her cases that are brought in her court.
Yes.
While I might not be in a court of law, I feel like my role as a senior female professor at the university is to advocate, to elevate the voices of the other junior faculty who may be afraid of speaking up. So I'm all about bystander intervention. And I think a lot of things go on that erode the self-confidence of women, cause a lot of mental health issues, is because people see the injustice that is going on. They sit silent. They stay silent because I don't want to ruffle the feathers, or I don't want to be retaliated against, or it is not really my business, or I'm only a small person who's going to listen to me. And when I look at my own life and the racism, the sexism that I experienced as a person that was a first in many spaces, when you are a Black woman in America, in the sciences, in the geosciences, you are going to be a first in many spaces. And when I look back and I said, oh, if there was one person who could just stand up in support of me, things would have not been so. So I have made it my point of saying, I will be the sacrificial lamb and I'm going to speak up. And at least I can advocate for those who don't have a voice. Very, very important. Do not stay silent. And that's what the Lady Justice said. Until women were sitting in the higher courts in Cameroon, then, because those were their lived experiences, they were able to bring their voice to bear to help shape the law that protects women. I think that as women in leadership, we have that role to play. It's not only for us advancing our careers, but that we have a responsibility, a very big responsibility. A burden is on us to be able to make it right, for those that are coming after us.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen.
Let me chip in with an anecdote about stereotypes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, by the way, I was also told I could not do law. Somebody called a pedagogic advisor put his glasses down his nose and said, your profile is too weak, you cannot do law. So, but I didn't listen to him because I'm kind of like a bumblebee. Scientists say that for something to be able to fly, the wingspan has got to be much longer than the body. Now, the bumblebee is this thick, short, fat, roundish bee, kind of like me, with short wings. very short wings. So scientifically, it is not supposed to fly. But the bumblebee does not know that. So it flies. You know, we women have got to stop knowing what we cannot do and start knowing what we can do. Now,
Mm-mm-mm.
talking about the stereotype, when I was state prosecutor, I was heavily guarded, Procureur de la République. I was
Yes.
moving about with a bodyguard everywhere. So at the beginning of the school year in October 2002, I went to University of Boya to look at my schedule, my timetable for the semester, because I taught first semester, which starts in October. So I'm with my orderly because we had gone up to the Attorney General to make reports on what is happening in our jurisdiction in Meme Division. So I'm moving with my policeman, with my orderly, and he sees another police officer, a senior police officer, who has probably come to look for admission for his child. So he salutes, and the police officer salutes back, the senior police officer. Then he looks, because my orderly was slightly to my slightly in front of me to my right. So he looks past my orderly. Is that your wife? I mean, I could feel that man blush. He said, it's a state council. It's a state council. Oh, you mean the state council's wife? No, it's the state council herself. It's the state council herself. And my orderly was so embarrassed. And I looked at him and like, why must I be somebody's wife? Because of course, they can't imagine what a woman can be doing with a policeman if she's not his wife. And a state council cannot be a woman. So she has got to be the state council's wife. But you see, those are those unconscious stereotypes.
Oh,
The way people see things.
Because when they look at the state council, that is not the definition of what a state council
Exactly.
is, right?
that
The
that
state council cannot be a woman.
And that
wow.
happens
Um,
all the time. And
Lady Justice, we are actually just beginning. Professor, we are actually just beginning, but I'm looking up and it's like we only have about 5 more minutes.
okay, all right, all right.
Oh,
So I don't even know what to do, but hey, I can do this. I have to be brave.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question. Let's say a mother is watching this with her daughter,
Mhm.
or a mother is watching this and she has to speak to her daughter. We live in a dispensation where there are many challenges. We have one of our viewers asking whether there's going to be another session. We live in a dispensation where, like the lady Justice said, there is a lot of confusion. People really don't know who they are anymore. And human beings want to be dogs. Human beings want to be aliens. Human beings want to be anything other than who they truly are.
yeah.
So, if we have a mother that is watching this, or a little girl that is watching this, and she is struggling with who she really is. I remember when I was growing up as a young girl, I thought boys had an advantage in this life, and sometimes I would just sit and wish I were a boy.
Sure.
I would just sit and wish I were a boy because I thought they had all the advantages in this life, and what's there being a girl? That had long since changed. But let's say we have this little girl or this mother that just wants to tell her daughter who she really is, to help her to discover her identity and to work on that. What would be your message? Let's go to the professor. What would be your message to that little girl? You're speaking to that little girl. She's 8 years old. She's 9 years old. She's 10 years old. Maybe she's 12, 13. What would be your message to her?
Well, thankfully, things have changed a lot, right? At the university, believe it or not, we have now more female students than male students. Imagine that. And it's not 52, 48. It's like 60, 65, 70%.
Wow.
There are some fields where we have like 90% females compared to males. So things are changing. I would say if I am that mother to that little girl, I would say what our mother taught us. We have to believe in ourselves. No man is better than no boy. No man is better than a woman. And to me, I think that I grew up with that self-esteem, believing that having that I can do attitude. I can do anything that I set my mind to it and never bothered about my gender, whether I was a
Mm,
male or female. So I think that is really important. And we had a mother who, uh, not known by the world, but known by everybody who came across her as being a real transformative agent of change. She transformed so many people's lives, especially the women in her life. Somehow, she just believed so much in empowering the woman, the girl child, that we grew up having that attitude, that sense. Maybe that's where we got our sense of advocacy. Maybe that's why we have a sense of rising up and speaking for those who could not speak for themselves
right.
because of what she instilled. So I
Mhm.
tell every mother out there, don't give in to these stereotypes. Empower your little daughter with a sense of that self esteem of I can do whatever I set my mind to do.
Mm,
Nothing.
mm. Thank you.
Because when you have that motivation, when you have that desire, when you have that willpower, that's all you really need. You can
Mm.
become anything that you want to be. And I'll say, please put some role models in their lives. If the mother is
Yes.
well educated, then find some aunties, some sisters, people in the community that are true role models and help connect them, network these kids, these young girls to them. That was
Wow.
I see.
Wow. Wow, thank you so much. At Leaders World Institute, we have the Girls Academy
Mm.
where we train. We just graduated our first batch. We had about 15 young girls between the ages of 8 and 15, where we are training them in personal development and leadership. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. I have parents calling me and asking when is the next
Yeah.
session, and I'm still working on that. And that stemmed from that desire to say, hey, what can we do to help the young generation? We're not going to let them be lost and then struggle to find themselves when we can do something about it.
Mm.
Lady Justice, what would you say to that little girl?
I will say to the little girl that you were already born a winner. Elementary biology will tell you that millions of spermatozoa were vying for your mother's ova. And that one that got your mother's ova was you. Millions perished. So the fact that you were conceived,
That's
you were
right.
already a winner. The
Yes.
fact that you were not stillborn, you are already a winner. The
Mhm.
fact that you could not be aborted, you are already a winner. So the fact that you were born alive and you are here on this earth, you are a winner. You were born with a purpose. You have something that you can do. And I will tell the mother, have a vision for your daughter. Motherhood is leadership. And leadership is discerned. Leadership is intentional. It is not by chance. Make principles, set down principles, have a vision of a desirable future that creates passion for your daughter, and teach your child to have vision. Let her understand her purpose, her identity, her peculiarity, and her giftings so that she is able to identify at a very young age the problems she can solve, the sphere of influence she can get in, and the
Mhm.
fact that she belongs in every sphere where decisions are made. And so she begins to move towards that goal and, train and enhance herself, towards that.
Okay, mamas, you heard it, right? You heard it. That was the Lady Justice. You heard it yourselves. So So we are at this point where if you're watching or you watch the replay, I'd like for you to write again in the chat for us. Women leading with our voices in our stories, or just women, our stories, our voices. Women, our stories, our voices. Women, our voices, our stories. Put it in the chat for us. We are at that point where it's not my favorite time of the show, but guess what? We have to do this. We have to do this. I am going to ask oh, I almost forgot. Okay, listen. The first person who was going to tell me the relationship between Lady Justice and the professor gets this book. Okay, because you should know by now. So what that relationship is like? Have they worked together somewhere, or maybe okay, maybe they're from the same country. What if you actually follow this, you should be able to know what the answer is. What is that relationship? And I'm going to take the best answer, and you're going to get this. If you're in the US, you're going to pay for your own shipping. If you are in Cameroon, everything will be covered. If you're in other parts of the country, we'll see how to make that happen for you. All right, maybe yeah, but you definitely have a copy. And the first person with the best answer, explain. Okay, you're going to explain as much as you can. Okay, write more than one sentence. Okay, and then you will be the one to get the book. And right now, we are closing. Lady Justice, thank you so much. We can't thank you enough for saying yes to this broadcast. Thousands of women, thousands of viewers watch this on YouTube, on LinkedIn, and other spaces where we throw this content. And there are some that would come to watch just because it was you that was on the show. Lady Justice, your last words for your audiences.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you all for listening. Stand up and stand out and make a difference. You were born for a purpose. Find out, you're not too old to find out what that purpose is, and do just something about it. Make a difference. Make a difference for women, make a difference for children. Half the world, or more than half the world, is made up of people who because of systems that had been entrenched in the past, they want to cover, stereotype, and put in a box. But women are people too. I'm not usually a feminist, but to the extent that I subscribe to the radical notion that women are people too, then call me a feminist. We have inalienable rights. We have a right to live. We need a chance in this life.
Thank you, ma'am. Professor, your last words for our audiences.
Well, again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to come here and lend my voice to this discussion. As my sister, Lady Justice, has said it more eloquently, that I really believe that as women, we have to tell our stories. Do not let somebody tell that story for you. Because as we know, over this past thousands of years, people have been telling that story for us. It has not ended well. And the only way that we can make a difference or to change that narrative is to be able to tell those stories ourselves. And it doesn't matter how young, how old you are. If you're old, there's still time to tell that story. If you are young, don't think yourself as being powerless. We've seen examples of some women, like young girls like Rosa Parks, who stood up and refused and had civil disobedience, and it changed the course of history. We've seen young girls like Greta Thunberg and Vanessa Nakate, who have stood up, young women, teenagers even, so to speak, and they've made world leaders to sit up and address the climate change crisis. So no voice is too small. Just believe in yourself and do it.
Stand up, stand out. No voice is too small. Believe in yourself and let your voice be heard. We'll see you next time.
For your corporate and personal needs.
Leaders World Institute, changing lives, one leader